In the Middle Ages, most of Europe lived in darkness, marked by oppression, persecution, and torture. This era was heavily dominated by black magic and witchcraft, particularly in Britain, which ruled over many nations, including Jamaica, a country that was, at the time, just another ordinary land under British occupation. The United Kingdom would send Africans and people of color from its colonies to other lands in need of labor. These individuals were treated almost like slaves. Among them was a girl named Annie, who would later become a name etched into history forever. In this dark chapter of history, we present to you the story of Annie, the White Witch of Jamaica, a tale that became a legend. The story of the White Witch of Jamaica holds a special place in the hearts of Jamaicans. Though based on real events, it has been passed down as though it were a myth or an integral part of their folklore. The tale begins in Europe when a British man married an African woman, and they had a daughter named Annie. Annie bore a closer resemblance to her European heritage, with pale skin and remarkable beauty despite her short stature. However, her life was far from happy. She lived with her parents for only a few months before they perished in a fire, leaving her an infant in the care of an African nanny who, unfortunately, was a malicious witch filled with darkness. Annie was raised by this dangerous sorceress who taught her the dark arts and evil doctrines. The witch believed that true power lay in magic and that a great future awaited those who could dominate the world through deception. Annie's childhood was grim, filled with bitterness and darkness. She learned to manipulate others and eventually began her malevolent journey in Jamaica. During one of the missions organized by Britain to Jamaica, Annie was forcibly sent there. In Jamaica, she met a wealthy landowner named John Palmer, an aristocrat who owned a large mansion resembling a palace. The mansion was filled with slaves and servants. Annie, who became John's wife, was deeply immersed in witchcraft and black magic. She became a Satan worshipper, conducting gruesome rituals that involved torture and the taking of lives. Naturally, she used the slaves as subjects for her horrific practices, employing all kinds of evil methods and chemical concoctions to deceive and harm them. Their lives became a living hell before she ultimately claimed their souls. Word spread quickly, and the people of Jamaica came to know of her. They called her the White Witch, as she was the only white practitioner of witchcraft in the land. Over time, witchcraft gained prominence in Jamaica and became a global example, largely because of Annie, whose ambitions extended far beyond living in the mansion. She desired to become its sole ruler, which could only happen by eliminating John Palmer, her loyal and devoted husband. Unfortunately for him, he was unaware that nothing he did would ever satisfy her unless it involved his demise. One fateful night, the residents of the mansion and all of Jamaica awoke to the news of John's death. Naturally, they suspected his beautiful wife of killing him. Strangely enough, just a few months later, people seemed to forget about John's death. Wealthy men began flocking to the mansion to court Annie, seemingly throwing themselves into danger. It became an easy cycle for her. Man after man, she lured them, enjoyed their company for a few days or months, and then sent them to their graves. Annie married more than 3 times, and in each case, her husbands died within a few months in mysterious circumstances. Strangely, the same ridiculous cause of death was always cited: a sudden heart attack. After her last marriage, Annie no longer needed a husband. She realized she could take lives and perform her dark rituals without being married. All she needed were the slaves she owned in the mansion. Each morning, the number of slaves dwindled, prompting an inevitable end to this nightmare. That end came in the form of retribution by the slaves themselves. In 1830, the Jamaican slave rebellion broke out. The uprising targeted the masters, freeing the land from their tyranny. Annie was at the top of the list of those marked for death. She was eliminated, leaving behind a legacy etched in Jamaican culture. This was the story of the White Witch of Jamaica, a child raised by the devil himself.